Your eyes shoot open. You're immediately blinded by white light illuminating the infinite corridor in front of you. Spanning forever ahead of you and forever behind you is a hallway. This hallway is lined with doors as far as you can see in either direction. You slowly step forward. Another step. You carefully twist the knob of the door next to you to peek inside. You keep walking, all the while cracking each door open to see what lies behind it. The minutes turn to hours, but the parallel rows of doors never end. You open as many as you can, but the further you go, the more anxiety builds in your chest, weighing you down. It is difficult to breathe. What door do I take? You ask yourself. And more importantly, what if it's the wrong door? You continue forward. Now, with the benefit of a surge in adrenaline, you fling each door open, stand proudly in its doorway. No, not this one, you whisper to yourself. You keep walking. The hours turn into days, or maybe weeks. You can't quite tell how long it's been, actually. Frustrated, you sit on the ground, exhausted, with your pulse rocking through the bottoms of your feet. Surely this can't be all there is, you think to yourself. There must be some kind of trick. The more you think about it, the more sure you become. You've played enough video games and seen enough movies in the past. You know that there must be something more to this hallway that you just can't see the end of. And like a lightning bolt, it hits you. What is the one thing all these doors have in common? It's the hallway itself. The single vein connecting each artery, each branch, is the very room you are already in. You stand up, brush yourself off, and with a renewed sense of purpose, you continue forward. When I was a teenager, I desperately wanted to be interesting. Punk rock, skateboarding, smoking terrible weed was a start, but I was always looking for the next metal album, the next offbeat movie, or the next esoteric idea to craft my identity around. The irony, of course, is that in this pursuit of being different and edgy, I was in fact acting like any normal teenager, experimental, fluid, and about as edgy as an ear piercing from a mall kiosk. While the details may be different, you have probably been down this path of self discovery once or twice yourself. A frequent stop on this path is, of course, the well trodden trail of Eastern wisdom. Buddhism, meditation, green tea, hell, maybe even some magic brightly colored rocks blessed by your local head shop owner to give you good fortune, find true love, or maybe just a bigger dong. But whatever your chosen flavor of esoterica, one thing was obvious to everyone around you. You most certainly were not edgy. Like many of the beatniks of old, at some point during my shallow but long-lasting dive into the esoteric deep, I found myself in possession of a 2,500-year-old book called the Tao Te Ching. If you've ever read the Tao, then you are probably familiar with its most noticeable quality. It is hard as to understand. Now, don't get me wrong. As a 33-year-old man, I would absolutely recommend reading this book if you have even a passing interest in the spiritual matters of life or of living a contemplative lifestyle. But as a half-stoned teenager in an Iron Maiden shirt trying to read it on a curb outside of a skate park, well, let's just say I didn't quite yet have the attention span, mental capacity, or life experience to understand a word of what I was reading. Nevertheless, I gifted a copy of the Tao to just about everyone I knew. I quoted it poorly in every blunt rotation I would sit in. I didn't need to understand it. It sounded cool. That was good enough for me. Soon enough, though, that out-of-place teenager succumbed to the passage of time. He grew into a young man, moved away from home, and just like we all do from time to time, started to concern himself with more concrete, down-to-earth aspects of life, an education, a career, relationships, stability. And although I didn't know it at the time, the words of the Tao had lodged themselves deep in the back of my brain, stuffed away neatly and untouched in the library of my mind. Fast forward the clock another 16 years. I was now twice as old, had a little bit of disposable income, and was on that same edgy journey of self discovery. Only this time, I wasn't sitting on a curb outside the skate park. I was in a hut in the jungle, experiencing my first ayahuasca session. I'll save the chaotic details of this experience for another time. There's plenty of stories out there about folks taking their first journey with the medicine if you're interested, but in the mind's eye of my dazed and catatonic state, I remembered the once confusing words of the Tao Te Ching that I read all those years before. And suddenly they made sense. As my mind drifted in and out of consciousness, stuck on the bridge connecting the world we inhabit and one entirely different, the beauty of the Tao, or the way, the path, finally opened up to me. The profound interconnectedness of all things, the beauty and ancient virtues of honor, discipline, the characteristics of being a just leader, the ingredients for being a good friend, a loving father, a faithful spouse, for being a good person, for living an examined life. And it clicked. All these years later, I was astonished that a book I had read nearly 2 decades prior had stuck with me in such a profound way, lodged deep in my subconscious, just waiting for the right moment to spring to the front of my mind and, at least momentarily, become one of the most important lessons I ever learned in my life. I imagined then, as I do now, if Lao Tzu, the Tao's ephemeral author, could have ever imagined when he wrote it nearly 2,500 years ago, that someday in the far future, some dipshit iPhone-wielding hippie would have such a deep connection with his work while he was tripping balls on DMT half a world away. I doubt it, honestly, but the Tao works in mysterious ways. But this experience made me appreciate the value of leaving something behind. By our nature, we as humans can never really leave those who come after us all the answers. In fact, even if we could, I don't know that we would want to. That would defeat the purpose of living our own lives. But we can leave little crumbs along the way, little things that helped us find the path when we were at the same crossroads. Small but noticeable mile markers that let others know that even though they can't see the road ahead, they are going in the right direction. They too are on the path. In 2016, I got a wild idea to travel to Japan. I'd never been outside the country, save a few trips over the southern border for some tacos as a teenager, so this trip was once in a lifetime. And if you don't know, Japan is well known and well respected for its truly remarkable public transit. Chief among the many different methods of getting around the archipelago is the Shinkansen, better colloquially known as the bullet train. If you're a tourist in Japan, you're likely to take this train at some point in your travels, especially if you, like me, took the oft-traveled route between Tokyo and Kyoto. The 3-hour ride is breathtaking. In fact, it was one of my favorite parts of the entire trip. And while you certainly pass through many busy city centers, much of the ride is actually quite rural. On my first ride from Tokyo to Kyoto, I sat in a seat with my back towards the front of the train. Thankfully, the smoothness of the maglev train helped make sure that I didn't get motion sickness while I had the slight perception of riding the 200-mile-per-hour train ride backwards. Now, I'd never been here before. Everything I saw was new. I didn't know where the trees and fields would break and where concrete and brick of urban jungle would creep back in. Some part of my adult self still wishes to be cool, so I wish I could tell you I had this realization in the moment, but truthfully, it would take another 10 years, a long career, a heartbreaking divorce, and much more life experience to finally realize, isn't life quite like this? When you gaze out the window of a backwards racing train, focusing on brand new terrain as it rushes away from you, it becomes clear that you only have a split second to focus on what's presently in front of you before it's suddenly in your past, unchangeable, unique, and ultimately fleeting. And just like life, You can't see the tracks in front of you. You can guess what they might look like, and a lot of times you'll be right, or at least pretty close, but you can never truly know. And by the time you finally see it, the present moment is in the rear view in the same instant. In Japanese, there is a saying, Ichigo Ichie, which roughly translated means once in a lifetime, never again. In other words, it's a reminder that every moment in this life is unique. Even if you ride the Shinkansen backwards 50 times on the same line, the experience will always be unique. Likewise, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "A man can never step in the same river twice, because it's not the same river and he's not the same man." Our lives are in a constant state of change. It's cliche to say, but it is true. Change is, in fact, the only constant. But what you do with that change, how you shape it, how you bend it, and how you adapt to it, well, it turns out you have quite a bit of agency there. Okay, fine. But you're probably asking yourself, what the fuck do I do with that? Life is a constant state of never truly knowing what the fuck is happening? Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, the human condition's pretty fucked, and if there is a God, I'll be sure to bring this up to him someday, but in the meantime, all we can really do is just deal. But how we deal makes all the difference. We can join the ranks of those who fight against it. We can try to become the first human in all of history to successfully fight against the waves of constant change and live to tell the tale, or we can just roll with it. And when you roll with it, something pretty incredible tends to happen. You tend to live a decently long life for the most part, and whether you try or not, you also tend to pick up some things along the way. I mean, come on, even your crazy uncle can sometimes offer up a decently interesting tidbit of wisdom at the Thanksgiving table after slugging 38 Coors Banquets from time to time. I mean, this shit just cannot be that hard, right? But that inevitable journey, buttressed by time on the one hand and simply just showing up and managing to survive on the other, and mixed with this sense of never truly knowing anything other than the present moment before it instantly becomes past, is why so many throughout history have referred to life as a path. Considering the fact that we can only ever see where we are standing on the path at any given time and where we have been, but never truly where we're going, just makes the path that much more arduous. You can fight against that fact, or you can roll with it. Much later in life, and perhaps unsurprisingly, my endless pursuit of cool guy points, preferably mixed with a not too unique flavor of Asian inspired spirituality, led me to further explore Buddhism. I'm sure someday I will do a whole video on exactly what the path of Buddhism has brought to my life, and it has certainly been life changing. But I recently sat in for a regular Sunday morning Dharma talk at my local Zen center, and the teacher leading the talk made a beautiful but interesting point. See, our Zen Center is newly renovated, and after more than a year of being closed, the main hall was only recently finished, and this was one of the first Saturday talks that took place in this new space. It had been pouring rain all week, but on this particular Saturday morning, it was crisp and cold, bright and sunny. The rays of the sun shone through the newly painted window frames, and a light speckle of dust effortlessly danced in and out of the rays of sunshine, peeking through and bouncing off the newly installed tatami mat on which the Sangha was sitting. The only reason we are all here today, the Doshin told the full room, which was spilling out into the hallway, is because the Buddha decided to teach what he had awoken to, and then generations came after him and continued to teach what they had learned. The entirety of our practice, he suggested, was a byproduct of an unbroken line of teachers teaching students, students becoming teachers, and then teaching new students over and over and over for 2,500 years, and voila, we're here. An entire generation of students gathered in a room because at one point in the distant past, a monk from Nepal made the crucial decision to leave something behind. There it is again. Isn't life exactly like that? Our whole lives are a microcosm of that same principle. We learn, the path teaches us more, we learn again, and brick by brick, we continue to build our own understanding, deploy it, and sure enough, we uncover a separate, splintering trail off our main path, but ultimately leading in the same direction. The Buddha, just like Lao Tzu, just like so many other teachers, artists, writers, musicians, parents, could have not had any concept of a Zen center in 2025, in the middle of a vibrant city, half the world away, would be filled to the brim with students of all ages, from all over the world, even on the internet, still listening to his very teachings and finding purpose and meaning in them and applying those teachings to their ever more complex personal lives. When he sat in meditation under the Bodhi tree and subsequently made the key decision to share his newly found knowledge with the world, all of this became possible. But had the Buddha not made that decision, and had the countless students that came after him not decided to also leave something behind, there's a good chance there would be no Soto Zen lineage to study under. There would be no Zen center. There would be no teacher, and there would be no students. Now, I don't really expect you or me or anyone to follow a path exactly like the literal Buddha. I mean, we have families and jobs and shit, but leaving something behind was the key on the Buddha's path. It's the only reason anyone anywhere today even knows he existed at all. I was very close with my grandma. In fact, I adored her. In so many moments of my life, I would call her when I was alone, in a city I didn't understand, away from my family and friends, and slowly learning the art of becoming an adult. We talked all the time, but even still, I felt like every conversation I would learn something new about her and hear some new story about her life. It was hard for me to understand then, but after she died, I started to realize how much I actually missed out on, even though her and I really tried to maximize every moment we spent with one another. At her celebration of life ceremony, my uncle prepared a slideshow full of different pictures of my grandma from throughout her life. You have probably seen one of these yourself, starring one of your loved ones at one point, and I'm sorry to say that if you haven't yet, you probably will. The start of the slideshow was full of pictures of her as I knew her, an old lady with two kids and two grandkids who loved antiques, a glass of wine with one or two ice cubes in it, and above all else, valued people for their character. But as the slideshow went further and further back in time, I saw sides of her I never knew existed. Pictures of her as a young mother, pictures of her modeling career in the 60s, pictures of her on her wedding day as a young girl holding her infant brother. I realized then how the fullness of one's life can only ever be truly known by them and them alone. No amount of phone calls, Christmas mornings, no amount of love could have ever shown me every intimate detail that I now, with her passing, so deeply craved. When I was very young, my grandma bought herself, and by extension me, a little journal called something like Tell Me Your Story, Grandma. It was a little book filled with journal prompts meant to guide the grandparent through their life story as a way to leave something intimate behind for their grandkids that would let them know as many of the intricate details of their grandparents' life that they could remember. This book sat on her coffee table for many years, maybe even decades. After she passed and I was helping my mom and uncle clean out her apartment, I happened to stumble upon it again. Excited like Indiana Jones finding a lost treasure map, I quickly grabbed it, dropped the box of knickknacks I was collecting, and sat on her couch to thumb through it. The first question asked my grandma about some of her earliest memories, to tell a story about when she was scared. My grandmother's response was only a few paragraphs, but her beautiful, delicate handwriting told the story about being a young girl in the midst of a vicious thunderstorm, the most violent she could remember. The thunder growled through the dark sky out her bedroom window like a panther prowling through the forest floor, unseen but deeply felt. The lightning burst into blinding white light, cutting through the darkness so close she thought she could feel the electricity in her bones. The raindrops piled so quickly outside her window, she thought she might drown. Much like a good book brings the reader right into the lives of its characters, I couldn't help but imagine myself in my grandmother's childhood room with her, watching silently as her father, who I had never known, consoled her until the storm subsided and she drifted back gently to sleep. But as I turned the page to read the next story, much to my dismay, the rest of the book was blank, full of journal prompts unanswered, memories not relived but instead lost, buried, crushed to dust under the weight of time. This emptiness is the price paid by the future when we don't leave something behind. I don't know how my life or my posthumous relationship with my grandmother might have changed if that book had been filled. I don't know how much less life experience I would have now if I hadn't visited Japan 10 years ago. I don't know how much less fulfilling my spiritual journey would have been if Buddha decided to keep his enlightenment to himself. Would I have found some equally interesting book to claim I understood for cool guy points if I hadn't read the Tao? Probably. But the point is, all the tools I have are there because somebody left something behind. And what each of those tools meant and how I used them on my own personal path, that was up to me. But just like the old saying goes, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Having the tools when I needed them made all the difference. And I only have them because someone, sometime, somewhere decided to leave something behind. Whoever was the first person to refer to life as a path has probably been dead for a few 100,000 years. It's just one of those human sayings like let it be or I love you. It's a term so fundamental to the human experience that it really has no beginning and probably no end. It is, on some fundamental level, synonymous with the experience of being conscious, of being alive. But what does it actually mean to be on the path? Well, roughly speaking, we all know what it means. It's just another way of describing one's life trajectory. But on another level, it can be so much more than that. It's something we feel in our bones. It's what gives us inspiration at a moment's notice, or drives us into a deep depression when things just aren't going well. It's a description of finding purpose through the process of living and finding meaning in life. It's who you are when no one else is around. It's who you try to find when you need to find yourself. It is, at root, your own unique experience in this life. It is the Ichigo Ichie of basic existence. But if being on the path is so fundamental, then why on earth is it also just so fucking hard? Well, if I had the answer, this video would be a lot shorter. But countless thinkers, writers, philosophers, artists, musicians, yogis, monks, fucking life coaches, podcasters, YouTubers, they've all spent plenty of time trying to answer that question, and no one has been able to do it yet. I certainly am not going to do it here. But what all of those people have in common is that through their pursuit of just finding out the answer to how to best navigate the path, they slowly made their own way through it. And that fact, just rolling with it, showing up, being alive, and paying attention to the path they were taking might not have given them all the answers, but it did give them some helpful insight into how they managed to just figure it out. The other thing many of those thinkers have in common is that they left something behind. Some work, some masterpiece, some poorly scribbled scroll, something that they put into the world to help others on their path. So let's go back to Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao. First of all, no one really knows if this dude even existed at all. In fact, scholars pretty much think he might not have, and the Tao was probably compiled by a bunch of different people over time. There's a lot of different legends surrounding how exactly the Tao itself came to be known to the world, but one of my favorites is a legend that says Lao Tzu was simply heading west when he met a border guard who begged him to write down his teachings for the betterment of humanity. According to this story, Lao Tzu apparently did, left them for the guard, and then basically wandered off. In other words, Lao Tzu was not worried about how many YouTube subscribers he had. He just did it for the love of the game, or in this case, love of the path. And whether that story is true or not, and it probably isn't really the point. There are plenty of people throughout history: Emily Dickinson, Franz Kafka, Vincent van Gogh, the medieval monks who transcribed the Bible, or the hunter gatherers who painted their hands on the walls of caves, and probably millions of others throughout human history, all whose names we'll never know, have all left something behind. And many of them didn't do it for money or fame or recognition or a dank advertising deal from DraftKings. They just did it. It's almost like leaving something behind was, ironically, a crucial pit stop on their own path. So, if you're the kind of person who watches videos like this, you probably watch others. Things about getting your life on track, meditation, working out, weird videos about the loss of third spaces, or Gen Z and millennial burnout, corporate fatigue, getting off social media. You probably aren't really down with how fucked politics are. You probably want to spend less time on screens, not more. I mean, come on, no one's New Year's resolution is to spend more time scrolling or more time being burnt out or hungover. And so, in case you haven't figured it out by now, you aren't alone. The crisis of our time is a crisis of meaning. Who we are at our core when you cut the cord, turn off the screen, quit that job you hate, leave the city you don't feel at home in anymore. Who we are when even our own path, the one we have become so familiar with, so comfortable with, becomes increasingly, terrifyingly hard to see. You don't need to wait for that next big move. You don't need to wait until you have all the money in your account to buy all the right tools. You don't need to make all the connections and networks first. Those things will come, but you have to get started, whatever that means to you. You can't guarantee that whatever you leave behind will resonate with anyone at all, but you can be certain that the passage of time will be full of fellow travelers, all looking for any sign that they are at least headed in the right direction. So do them a favor. As you walk your own path, pick up as many of the breadcrumbs as you can left by fellow travelers along the way. Keep the ones that work for you and leave the ones behind that might be able to help somebody else out. And while you navigate the trail, don't forget to leave a mark for a fellow traveler you might never meet. Don't forget to leave something behind.